The camera drones hovered in absolute silence above the execution square of Calvex Prime, broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy the image of a single human, kneeling in chains before the assembled might of the Xylo Dominion. His name was Dorian Sin. In less than 4 minutes, he would be dead, and in less than 4 minutes, he would destroy an empire without lifting a single weapon. To understand how a condemned man's final breath became the deadliest strike in galactic history, we have to go back to the beginning, to a peace mission that was never meant to end in blood. 3 months earlier, Ambassador Dorian Sin had been humanity's chosen voice to the Xylo Dominion, a civilization that had conquered 11 star systems through sheer, merciless force. Earth's unified council believed diplomacy could still work. Sin believed it too, right up until Moment High Regent Caesarian Voth decided that a public execution would send a louder message than any treaty ever could. Sin was captured during what should have been a routine negotiation aboard the Dominion flagship Ashen Crown. The Xylo did not simply want to kill him. They wanted the galaxy to watch him die, a warning broadcast to every species still weighing whether to resist Dominion rule. Every camera in Xylo space was ordered to carry the feed live. It was meant to be humanity's humiliation. It became something else entirely. In the hours before his execution, chained inside a transport cell orbiting Calvex Prime, Sin was given one final indignity, a chance to record a confession for Dominion propaganda. The guards assumed he would beg. Instead, Sin asked for privacy to prepare his soul, a request the Xylo, who practiced their own rigid death rites, could not refuse without appearing barbaric even by their own standards. Alone, Sin activated a hidden neural relay implant sewn into his molar during a pre-mission surgery months earlier, a failsafe every council ambassador carried but few ever used. It was designed for one purpose only: to transmit compressed data across vast distances using the quantum entanglement network Earth had only just perfected. No signal, no trace, no way for the Xylo to detect it. For the next 6 hours, Dorian Sin did not sleep, did not weep, and did not pray. He worked, drawing on 3 months of guarded conversations, overheard command briefings, glimpsed star charts, and the small, careless mistakes his captors had made in front of a man they considered already dead. Sin assembled the single most valuable piece of military intelligence in human history: fleet deployment patterns, command hierarchy weaknesses, supply chain vulnerabilities, and, most critically, the exact stellar classification and instability markers of the star at the heart of the Xylo. Home system. He had one chance to send it. He took it. The morning of the execution, Sin was marching to the square in full view of a jeering crowd and a galaxy of unseen witnesses. High Regent Voth wanted a spectacle of fear. He gave a speech about the futility of resistance, about how even Earth's ambassadors would kneel before the Dominion's inevitable expansion. Sin said nothing. He knelt. He waited. What Voth did not know, could not have known, was that Sin's transmission had already reached Earth 6 hours earlier, decoded and delivered directly into the hands of Fleet Admiral Helena Voss, commander of the Sol Defense Fleet. While the Dominion prepared to make an example of one man, humanity was already reading the blueprint of the Dominion's own destruction. As the Executioner's Blade, an ancient ceremonial weapon the Xylo used specifically to communicate finality and dominance, rose above him, Dorian Sin lifted his head one last time. He did not look afraid. Witnesses across a dozen systems would later describe the strange, unsettling calm on his face, a calm the Xylo mistook for surrender. It was not surrender. It was relief. Relief that his message had gotten through. Relief that his death, unlike so many senseless deaths in this cruel war, would actually mean something. The blade fell. The broadcast cut to static. High Regent Voth had won his spectacle. He had no idea he had just lost a war. Millions of light years away, in a war room buried deep beneath the Rockies, Admiral Helena Voss stared at the final line of Sin's transmission, a line he'd appended in his last seconds of freedom. Make it count. Don't send a fleet. Send a message they'll never recover from. She would not disappoint him. Admiral Helena Voss had not slept in 31 hours, and she would not sleep for many more. On an enormous holographic display before her, the entire architecture of the Xylo Dominion hung, suspended in cold blue light. Every fleet position, every command structure, every fortified world Dorian Sin had died to reveal. It was the most complete intelligence package ever assembled on an enemy force. And it terrified her more than any battle plan she had ever seen, because the numbers didn't lie. The Xylo Dominion fielded 11 war fleets, over 4,000 capital ships, and a military-industrial engine capable of replacing losses faster than any conventional human offensive could inflict them. A direct war, even armed with Sin's intelligence, would cost humanity everything. Voss understood immediately. They could not win this the way soldiers had won wars for centuries. They needed something else, something the Xylo would never see coming, because it wasn't a strategy of war at all. It was a strategy of physics. News of Sin's execution reached the Unified Earth Council within hours, and the reaction was exactly what Voss feared: outrage, grief, and a deafening demand for immediate retaliation. Councilwoman Adiz Brenner stood before the assembled chamber, her voice shaking with barely restrained fury, calling for full mobilization of every human warship toward Xylo space. "They executed our ambassador like an animal," she said, "and broadcast it to humiliate us. We answer with fire." Voss understood the anger. She shared it, but she also understood that fire, in this case, meant annihilation, not of the enemy, but humanity's entire military capacity in a single doomed offensive. She requested, and was reluctantly granted, 48 hours to present an alternative before the Council authorized full mobilization. It was the only concession she needed. Buried deep within Sin's final transmission, almost as an afterthought amid tactical details on fleet positioning, was a fragment of astrophysical data that had seemed, at first glance, irrelevant. Coordinates, stellar classification markers, notes on unusual solar activity the Xylo themselves had recorded and dismissed as a minor engineering curiosity around their homeworld star, Kessora. Voss brought the fragment to Dr. Imogen Yale, Earth's foremost astrophysicist and the architect behind humanity's experimental deep space stellar engineering program, a program shelved years earlier for being theoretically sound but practically reckless. Yale studied the data for 6 hours straight before delivering a single, staggering conclusion. Kessora, the star the entire Xylo Dominion depended on for its capital world survival, sat on the exact edge of a rare stellar instability threshold. Under normal conditions, it would remain stable for millennia, but if triggered correctly, with a precise, localized disruption device delivered directly into its outer convective layer, that stability could be catastrophically, irreversibly broken. Voss returned to the Council not with a request for war, but with something far stranger, a request for a single ship, a small volunteer crew, and total secrecy. She called it the Ember Project. Its objective was simple to state and nearly impossible to execute: deliver a stellar disruption device into the heart of Kessora itself while the bulk of the Xylo Dominion's attention was fixed elsewhere, and let physics finish what diplomacy could not. The Council was skeptical. Some called it madness. Brenner herself asked a question that hung over the entire room. "You're asking us to trust the fate of humanity to a handful of volunteers slipping past the most powerful fleet in the galaxy?" Voss's answer was simple. Dorian Sin didn't die so we could throw more soldiers at a war we can't win. He died so we could end it. This is how we end it. The vote was close, but it passed. Ember Project was authorized. Somewhere in a classified shipyard orbiting Titan, engineers began stripping down a stealth reconnaissance vessel and rebuilding it into something new, a ship with only one mission and no plan for its crew's return. They would call it the Quietist. And soon, humanity would begin the terrible work of finding people willing to fly it. The call for volunteers never mentioned the word suicide. It didn't have to. Every soldier, engineer, and pilot who read the mission brief for what would later be called the Ember Project understood immediately what they were being asked to sign up for. And still, when Fleet Command opened the recruitment terminal, over 6,000 applications arrived within the first 48 hours. Admiral Voss had expected perhaps a few hundred. She had not expected an entire fleet's worth of humanity to raise its hand and say, "Send me instead." The selection process was brutal by necessity. The Quietist could carry no more than 6 people, each filling a critical role: a pilot capable of navigating a stealth vessel through hostile territory undetected, an engineer to interface with a stellar disruption device, a tactical officer, a communications specialist, a physicist to monitor the trigger sequence in real time, and a commanding officer to hold it all together. Command fell to Captain Reyna Okafor, a decorated fleet officer who had lost her entire first command crew in an earlier Dominion skirmish and had spent the years since quietly, privately volunteering for every dangerous mission that crossed her desk. When Voss personally briefed her on Ember, Okafor asked only one question: "How long do we have with our families before we go?" The engineer's seat went to Marcus Iwu, a soft-spoken systems specialist who had helped design the very implant that let Dorian Sin transmit his final message. He had never met Sin personally, but he had studied every second of the recovered data, and he told Voss plainly, "I built the door he walked through. I want to be the one who finishes what he started." Rounding out the crew were physicist Dr. Sonar Reyes, pilot Ilya Petrov, a former smuggler pardoned specifically for his unmatched skill at slipping past hostile sensor rays, communications officer Devon Achebi, and tactical officer Priya Nandan. 6 names, 6 people who understood, without needing to be told twice, that this mission had no return leg. Ember could not succeed on stealth alone. The Dominion's home system was too heavily defended, its sensor net too dense, for even a ship as advanced as the Quietus to slip through unnoticed if the Xylo fleets were paying full attention. Voss's plan required a second component, one she dreaded revealing even to her own senior staff: the bulk of humanity's remaining battle fleet, nearly 700 warships, would launch a massive, deliberately visible offensive against the Dominion's forward territories. It would not be a feint designed to retreat at the first sign of danger. It needed to look, sound, and feel like humanity's true, desperate, all-or-nothing counterattack, because only genuine, sustained engagement would draw enough Dominion attention and resources away from their home system long enough for Quietus to complete its approach. Fleet Admiral Terence Cho, commanding the diversionary force, understood exactly what Voss was asking of him and his crews when she briefed him in private. "You're asking me to fight a real war," Cho said quietly, "so 6 people can win a different one." "I'm asking you to buy them time," Voss replied, "however much it costs." Cho did not hesitate before accepting. 3 weeks after the Ember Project's authorization, the Quietus was ready. Its crew spent their final night on Earth not in briefings, but with their families, brief, aching hours no mission report would ever record. Captain Okafor held her sister's hands and said nothing about where she was going, only that it mattered and that she loved her. Marcus Iwa left a letter for a daughter too young yet to read it, to be given to her only if he did not return, a certainty everyone quietly understood. At dawn, the Quietus launched from a hidden dock beneath the lunar surface, slipping into the black without fanfare, without a formal send-off, without even a name recorded on any official mission log that would survive first contact with Dominion forces. Behind it, across 100 systems, Admiral Cho's diversionary fleet began moving into position, the largest human force ever assembled, preparing to throw itself against impossible odds for a purpose most of its crews would never fully know. 2 forces, 1 true objective, and a star, 400 light-years away, that did not yet know it was about to become the most important weapon humanity had ever fired. Space, humanity had learned long ago, was not silent. It was patient. And patience, more than any weapon in humanity's arsenal, was about to become a deciding factor in a war no one back on Earth could watch unfold in real time. The Quietus traveled dark. No active sensors, no communication bursts, no emissions beyond what its stealth hull could not fully suppress. For 11 days, Captain Okafor's crew lived inside a ship the size of a small transport vessel, threading a route through Dominion space that Ilya Petrov had plotted using nothing but some stolen intelligence and a smuggler's instinct for the gaps between patrol routes. Every hour brought them closer to Kessora. Every hour brought them closer to a fleet capable of erasing them without a second thought. For days into Quietus' silent approach, Admiral Cho's fleet crossed into Dominion forward territory and opened fire on the fortified shipyards of Havoc Station, the first true engagement of what Xylo Command would soon be calling humanity's final, desperate offensive. It was by design an enormous, unmistakable act of war. The battle was catastrophic. Cho's fleet, though vast by human standards, was still outgunned and outnumbered by the Dominion's forward defenses. Ships burned by the dozens within the first hour. But the offensive did exactly what it needed to do. It forced High Regent Voth to divert 3 additional battle fleets from deeper Dominion territory to reinforce the front, stripping away layers of defense from systems closer to home, including, critically, a portion of the sensor coverage surrounding Kessora itself. Cho's crews did not know why they were fighting so hard for a shipyard of secondary strategic value. They only knew their orders were to hold as long as possible, and they obeyed, paying in blood for every additional hour Voss's true plan required. On the 9th day of its approach, the Quietus nearly ended everything. A routine Dominion patrol frigate, part of a reduced but still active picket line near the outer edge of the Kessora system, altered its course unexpectedly, directly toward the stealth vessel's projected path. For 6 unbearable minutes, Captain Okafor's crew sat in total silence, engines at minimum output, as the frigate sensor sweep past within detection range. Ilya Petrov, hands steady despite everything, made the split-second call to drift the ship along a debris field trailing from an old mining operation, using the scattered wreckage to mask the Quietus' already minimal signature. The frigate's sweep registered nothing but ordinary debris and moved on, unaware it had passed within a few thousand kilometers of the single greatest threat the Dominion had ever faced. No one spoke for several minutes after the frigate withdrew. Priya Nandin finally broke the silence. "We're not going to get that lucky twice." Okafor didn't disagree. She simply gave the order to continue. On the 11th day, the Quietus crossed into the inner Kessora system, close enough now that the star itself dominated every viewport. A vast, burning sphere of light utterly indifferent to the war being waged in its name. Dr. Sanar Reyes ran the final confirmation scans against the data Dorianson had died to obtain, cross-referencing every instability marker, every convective anomaly against what Marcus Iwa's disruption device had been calibrated to exploit. The numbers matched. The theory held. Everything Sin had transmitted, everything Voss had gambled on, everything Cho's crews were still dying to protect, all of it converged in this single, quiet moment as the Quietus began its final approach toward the star's outer layer. Captain Okafor gathered her crew one last time before the deployment sequence began. There was no dramatic speech, only a simple acknowledgement of what they had already accepted weeks earlier. "Whatever happens after this," she said, "we finish what Sin started. Let's make it count." The ship moved forward, into the light, toward the star that was about to become humanity's final answer to an empire that had underestimated it. The device Marcus Iwa had spent 3 weeks calibrating aboard the Quietus was, in physical terms, unremarkable. A compact housing barely larger than a human torso, containing a localized gravitic disruptor designed to fold and destabilize a precisely targeted section of the star's outer convective zone. In theoretical terms, it was one of the most dangerous pieces of engineering humanity had ever built. Dr. Imogen Yale's models predicted it would take less than 90 seconds of exposure to trigger an irreversible cascading reaction. What that reaction would ultimately unleash, no one on Earth could say with total certainty. They only knew it would be catastrophic, and it would be aimed squarely at the heart of the Xylo Dominion. The Quietus released a disruption device at the exact coordinates Sin's data had identified, then began the delicate, nerve-shredding process of withdrawing to a survivable distance while the device's automated systems anchored themselves into the star's outer layer using a specialized magnetic tether Marcus Iwa had designed specifically for this impossible task. Every second of the deployment was broadcast in tight, encrypted bursts back toward Earth, arriving with a communication delay that meant Admiral Voss would not know the mission's true outcome until long after it had already been decided one way or another. Aboard the ship, Sanaa Reyes monitored the device's telemetry with a focus so total she barely registered Priya Nandin's hand gripping her shoulder in silent support. "Anchor confirmed," Reyes finally said, her voice cracking with exhaustion and something close to disbelief. "It's in position." At the exact same moment, 400 light-years away, Admiral Cho's diversionary fleet reached the absolute limit of what it could withstand. Having drawn in nearly a third of the Dominion's total military strength, Cho's remaining ships, fewer than 100 of the original 700, found themselves surrounded near the fortified world of Denvac's reach, with no path to retreat and no reinforcements coming. High Regent Voth, believing he had successfully crushed humanity's desperate counteroffensive, ordered the final annihilation of Cho's fleet, intending to broadcast the destruction across the galaxy as proof the Dominion's supremacy remained absolute. Cho gave the order to hold formation regardless, buying every additional minute possible, unaware that his fleet's sacrifice was, at that very moment, achieving exactly the purpose Voss had asked of it. The last transmission recorded from Cho's flagship read, simply, "Hold the line. Make it worth something." 93 seconds after activation, Marcus Iwa's disruption device completed its final sequence. What followed was not an explosion in any conventional sense, but something far older and far more terrible, a star's own internal balance, meticulously maintained for billions of years, collapsing inward and then erupting outward in a targeted, catastrophic solar flare of a magnitude no natural process could have produced on its own. The flare tore through the Kessora system with a force that defied every Dominion defense system. Automated planetary shields, designed to withstand conventional weapons, buckled instantly under radiation and thermal output far beyond anything they had been built to survive. The bulk of the Dominion's home fleet, stationed in orbit around the capital world, was annihilated within minutes. Ships not destroyed by weapons fire, but simply overwhelmed by a star behaving in ways no Xylo engineer had ever modeled. The capital world itself survived, barely, its outer atmosphere and surface ecosystems scorched into a devastation that would take generations to recover from. High Regent Voth, watching reports arrive from a command bunker deep beneath the planet's surface, understood with sudden, horrifying clarity what had happened and what it meant. The empire that had built its rule on the certainty of overwhelming force had just been defeated by 6 people, a stolen fragment of astrophysics, and a star it had never thought to fear. The Quietus, battered by the flare's outer shockwave far earlier than its crew had hoped to escape, transmitted one final message before communications went silent, confirmation of ignition and nothing more. In the days following the destruction at Kessora, the Xylo Dominion did something it had never done in over 2 centuries of conquest. It stopped fighting. High Regent Voth, his capital world in ruins and his primary fleet reduced to wreckage, broadcast an unconditional surrender to every system under Dominion control and, in an unprecedented move, to the wider galaxy itself. The message was short and unmistakably shaken. The Xylo Dominion would withdraw from all contested territories, release all prisoners, and never again engage the human species in open conflict. Word of the surrender spread faster than any battle report in galactic history. Civilizations that had spent years living under Dominion oppression, or in fear of eventual Dominion expansion, watched in disbelief as the empire that had seemed unstoppable folded within days of a single devastating strike. Diplomatic channels across a dozen star systems opened almost simultaneously, each one asking some version of the same question. How had humanity done it? Admiral Voss, standing before the Unified Earth Council to deliver her official report, chose her words carefully. She did not reveal the full details of the Ember Project. Some secrets, she argued, needed to remain buried alongside the people who had died, carrying them out. She said only that humanity had responded to an act of cruelty with precision, not vengeance, and that the Dominion's defeat had been earned through sacrifice rather than superior force. The victory had not come without devastating cost. Of Admiral Cho's diversionary fleet, fewer than 60 ships returned to Earth space, carrying survivors who would spend years processing what they had endured at Denvac's reach. Cho himself did not survive the final engagement, but his final order, to hold the line no matter the cost, was recovered from his flagship's black box and read aloud at a memorial attended by millions. The Quietus was never recovered. Whether Captain Okafor's crew survived long enough to witness the flare's ignition, or whether the ship was lost in the shockwave moments after transmitting its final message, remained unknown. Earth chose to honor all 6 crew members as heroes regardless, their names inscribed alongside Dorian Sins on a new memorial constructed in the heart of the Unified Council chamber, a quiet, deliberately unremarkable monument that Voss insisted should never glorify what had been done, only remember who had paid for it. In the years that followed, the destruction of the Xylo Dominion's home fleet became known simply as the Ember Incident, a single, terrible lesson that reshaped how every civilization in the region approached humanity. Diplomats who had once dismissed Earth as a minor, cautious species revised their assessments entirely. Humanity, they learned, would seek peace patiently, absorb insult and injury, without rushing to war, and negotiate in good faith for as long as good faith was offered in return. But betray that peace and humanity would respond not with rage, but with something far more unsettling, calculated, devastating precision, delivered by people willing to give everything and expect nothing in return. Dorian Sin's final message, recovered in full and eventually declassified years later, ended not with demand or threat, but with a simple, quiet line that would come to define humanity's place among the stars. Let this cost mean something. Let it be the last time anyone has to pay it. It was the last thing he ever said. It became the reason no empire, in all the years that followed, ever dared to test humanity's patience again.